Hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar on how Shopify is becoming a game changer for SAP customers. We'll be covering some important topics like increasing popularity of Shopify in recent years, how SAP customers can leverage the platform for an integrated commerce, steps to overcome challenges while integrating Shopify with SAP, and the best practices and benefits of having a packaged integration solution. We have here with us Shailendu Verma, President Outperform IT. He's an entrepreneur and avid La Liga follower with me. So hi Shailendu.
Hi Anmol, thanks
He
for the
has
introduction.
he has great expertise in systems integration and digital transformation process. He has been transforming ideas into reality and automating manual data entry for the last 12 years right now. So over to you, Shailendu. Shall we start?
Definitely Anmol. Really thanks once again for introducing me.
Yeah.
And I just want to let you know that I also have Harshit along with me, and he's going to help me. He's going to help me out with question and answer session.
Perfect.
So now that we have a context, so let's see the agenda for today's webinar. So as Anmol was earlier saying, first we'll start with analyzing the popularity of Shopify, especially in the last 5 years, how it has taken off. Then we're going to look at why SAP and Shopify integration could be a game changer and why it makes so much of sense for SAP enterprise customers to go and integrate their web store on Shopify. Next, we're going to look at crucial considerations while integrating these platforms and typical integration needs a company may have while integrating SAP and Shopify. Now that we have done so many enterprise projects, we have our learning summarized into the next slide or next section, which will form our learnings and key takeaway. And we'll open the floor for question and answer at the end. Although you can keep noting your question and sending it across at any point during this webinar. So let's look at some numbers out here. Now, if you see any of these dimensions like number of sellers, buyers, orders, or number of applications which are there on Shopify platform, one thing that will strike you is that Shopify has grown tremendously in the last 5 years. Now, for example, number of buyers per year is like 17 times of what it was in 2014. $80 billion of sales this year so far in 2021. So that speaks a lot about Shopify's growing popularity. And if market cap or share price is any indication of the platform itself, you could see that this the Shopify share price have like increased over 3,000% in the last 5 years. So now with that context, and then we realize how Shopify is becoming increasingly popular, let's look at why Shopify makes so much of sense for a company which is running on SAP. Now, the first thing that strikes me and over my discussion with a lot of enterprise customers, the foremost reason why they would want to go with Shopify is shorter and more affordable time to market. Now, I wouldn't name any e-commerce platform out here, but the typical SAP e-commerce integration would be a project running for more than 8 or 12 months. Now, companies do not have that much time to react and launch their web stores. They want to get started quickly. Especially in this pandemic, many companies have realized that they need to go online. They're looking at means to doing it faster. And that's where Shopify comes in. Even for enterprise, complicated enterprises, for example, running on SAP, I have seen them launching their web stores in less than 3 months. And when I say 3 months, it's designing the web store, integrating it, and launching that. So that's like within 3 months, they're able to do that. And the second reason why companies are going for Shopify is that they have tremendously matured and very cleanly stated APIs. So this helps these companies integrate their web commerce or Shopify web stores with SAP and not lose control. Let's say they would want to have pricing flowing from SAP. They would want to have web orders coming in from Shopify. All these integration points can be designed and made to work very closely. So that is the second reason why SAP customers are looking at integrating Shopify. The last reason is that obviously Shopify being a SaaS-based application, there are very, very few infrastructure needs. So you could have like highly customized, personalized web store. You can start small and you can scale up. You don't have to invest a lot even to start with. And as you grow, even then you do not have a lot of headaches of maintaining the infrastructure. So these are the three reasons why I feel more and more enterprise are looking at Shopify to launch their web store on. So now having understood why SAP and Shopify is a winning combination, let's look at what consideration a company must have, or typically what concerns they might be having while integrating SAP and Shopify. And the first reason is that nobody wants to expose their SAP to external world. Typically, your entire finance, controlling, HR, and a lot of confidential information is there on your SAP ERP infrastructure. And Shopify being a SaaS-based application, right? You would want to integrate it with SAP, and then you do not want to compromise on security. So this is one of the top consideration that I usually come across. The second is architectural difference, and that's basically the way ERP has been. Most of the SAP deployment are on-premise, and it's a totally different architecture. I know that more and more companies are beginning to explore the cloud option and having SAP hosted on cloud. But the way these two applications work is entirely different, and they have completely different architecture. So they are looking at some bridge which can actually support both the ends of communication or both the architectures and help integrate these platforms. So the second consideration that comes into play is the architecture difference. The last one, customization. Now, a typical SAP implementation takes like 2 or 3 years to get matured. There are a lot of effort and investment goes into implementing SAP. And one of the top concerns that I see IT managers or CIOs having is that when they integrate a new solution or they integrate web commerce like Shopify, it should not have any impact on SAP. And this is another concern that people usually have. So these three considerations is like the top three, I could say, that CIOs have while integrating SAP and Shopify. Now, what do companies typically integrate between these applications? Okay. And I have listed these important touch points out here. Now, this is not an exhaustive list, I would say, but this is what typically or the baseline solution that we offer. So the first one is the product sync, and you would want your merchandise from SAP to go to Shopify. Now, not necessarily you would want to list all your materials to be available on Shopify. So you would want to have a subsection of material or your product master to be listed on Shopify for sale. And this is the first integration point. And obviously the second one is you would want to have control on the pricing and the margins. So SAP has a detailed price determination, and it's set up very meticulously in SAP. So you would want this price information coming in from SAP and dictating what prices should be listed on the web store. Now, very closely related to this is promotions. So you could have promotions running in for a certain period. Maybe let's say, for example, Thanksgiving, where you might have this 20% off for certain products. So you would want them to sync timely as those promotions go live. So price sync is the second integration point. The third thing is the inventory, and this is something that keeps on changing intraday as well. And one important thing to realize is that not necessarily the stock that you have in SAP corresponds to what you would want to show on Shopify. So for example, if you have a product line and let's say there is like 100 quantity in your stock, maybe 40 of them are blocked for the committed orders. They're just waiting there to be shipped. So actually your available to promise quantity is only 60, And this is what is available to a new incoming order. So available to promise quantity from SAP to Shopify. This is, crucial touch point. And so it's like, something that almost all the merchants want to sync until unless they are dealing with some virtual products. The next one is the order sync, and we'll look at the order sync in detail in the next slide because this is one of the crucial touch point as well. But as soon as we have a new web order, the merchants want to sync it back to SAP so that it could be fulfilled. The last one, which is there in this list, is the tracking information. Now, when you place an order on the web store and it gets shipped, you would want to track the deliveries as a customer, and what you would want to see the tracking number. So this usually comes into SAP with some carrier integration process. So as soon as the PGI is happening out of SAP, we sync this information back to Shopify so that end customer gets an alert. So these are the important touch point. And if you see what goes into a touch point, I will show it with an example of order sync. Now, if you're able to see the screen, this is a SAP order. It is coming from Shopify. And let's see what goes inside this. The first and foremost thing is that prices should exactly match what was there on Shopify. Now, if the customer has placed an order and let's say he has put in $100 for it, the SAP order should exactly match what was actually sold on Shopify. Now, you could say that, yeah, we are already syncing the prices from SAP to Shopify, so they should match. But not necessarily this happens in all the cases. I'll give you an example how. Okay, you could have a promotion exclusively set up on Shopify, which is completely the discounting rules are calculated on Shopify. Or you could have tax determination in Shopify. You could have freight determination in Shopify. So let's say a customer is placing an order and he wants to expedite the shipping, and he's willing to pay, let's say, additional $5 for it. Okay. Now, SAP needs to know what shipping method has been used, right? There's something that gets determined in Shopify. So a crucial point, a crucial consideration here is that if the pricing elements are determined in Shopify, those have to be exactly communicated with SAP so that prices are in sync. The second thing out here, as you can see, is the Shopify order number. Now, many times the admin team or the backend team needs to cross-reference Shopify order into SAP. And this is the way that usually we have implemented the solution is that the Shopify order numbers goes into the PO number field in SAP so that the backend team can cross-reference Shopify order versus the SAP order. Now, the next one is an interesting one, so which is a delivery block. In certain cases, you might want to put a delivery block on SAP order. Now, one of these cases, let's say if it is a fraudulent order, if a credit card has been misused to place an order, you would want to put a delivery block so that this order doesn't get fulfilled. So this is also an important integration element. The next one is, of course, the line item level details, the SKU, the order quantity, and I've also mentioned item category. Now, why item category? Now, let's say you could set up a rule in Shopify that if you buy one of a certain product, another one is free. And the way that gets integrated is that we set up a free goods item category while synchronizing the order. So this is another element for synchronization. So all this information, as you could see, is actually going into this specific touch point. So you can realize that integrating Shopify with SAP has to be flexible, has to be detailed, so that your business rules are kept intact. So now that we know what considerations are there between while integrating this application, what touch points are there, and now that we've seen an order sync as an example, right? Now I'll tell you what our key learnings were while integrating SAP and Shopify. Now, as I was just discussing, your middleware has to be flexible. And when I say flexible, What I mean is that it should enable or it should give you an option to deploy it on premise or on cloud. It should be able to handle business rules flexibly. You may have certain business rules or integration rules when you start, but then you realize that you need to change something. So the middleware has to be flexible to allow you those mappings. So this is the first thing. So when you decide on the middleware, you need to have a complete flexibility in terms of the deployment and mapping. The second one, as I was touching base with earlier, is the Shopify API limits. Now, Shopify being a SaaS-based application, it has certain limits, and the limits are kept because they do not want one merchant to consume all the resources. And when we have these limits, the usual touch points or the usual integration point work absolutely fine. It's the mass update touch points that become a problem. So something like price changes, let's say if you have the entire line 20% off on certain day, right? We need to update so many products, right? So that becomes a mass change. So these touch points become a crucial differentiator in terms of API consumption. For example, inventory sync as well. You could have inventory changing so many times a day. So the idea is that when you have an integration call, that payload has to be designed intelligently. You should be able to achieve maximum in that payload. The second thing is that you have to save on unnecessary calls. If the prices have not changed, if the inventory has not changed for SKU, you should not call the API. Okay, and you should conserve on that limit. So these are some ways that you can actually work smartly around the Shopify API limits. The third thing is that many times companies go for a custom built solution, whereas that could be a business case for some of the companies. What we learned is pre-configured solution which is like already configured and made to work in can be just deployed into your landscape. Those save a lot of time and money, and it also eases a bit on your SAP team's bandwidth. Most often, and in almost all the cases, we find that customers' SAP team is already overloaded with a lot of ongoing tasks. If we add the integration to the task list, they are not at all happy. And that's understandable. So a pre-configured solution which can be deployed rapidly, it is already pre-tested in some other environment. It will not break things in SAP. That is the way to go. It increases reliability and your success chances. The next one is do not customize SAP until unless needed. Now, SAP standard objects, integration objects are really powerful. And what we recommend is that we try to analyze and see if any of the standard SAP objects can meet the business requirement instead of creating a custom one. So typical thing is start using the standard BAPIs, using the standard iDocs, and using them in a smart combination and avoiding unnecessary SAP customization. So this helps reduce the regression testing. It helps reduce any chances of failure. It reduces any production impact on any other process. So this is one of our recommendations, that do not customize SAP unnecessarily. Always analyze it twice before making changes. The last one is integrating phases. And the only reason why I say this is that have your important integration needs covered in the phase one. And when you launch the website, you launch the web store, you might have certain realizations after that. You might get new insight. You might have some customers putting in some feature requests. You might have your internal IT team requesting you something. So you can combine all of this, and then you can have a phase two where you can take up the good to haves. So this is another learning that we have had. So these point kind of summarizes our learnings across so many implementation. I think the next section is for you to raise any questions, And Harshit, if we have any question, can we take them up now?
Yeah, this is a question. First one. What are the Shopify rate limits you were talking about in the presentation while you were doing presentation?
Okay. So Shopify, as I was discussing, SaaS-based application has the rate limits. Now I'll give you an example. There are different types of APIs that Shopify provides. Now usually we connect with the REST API, so I can give you an example with that. So Shopify allows you 2 REST calls per second, and if you take their premium subscription, which is called Shopify Plus, then you are allowed 4 integration call or 4 REST calls per second. So this is the kind of API limits that Shopify has. So I hope that answers the question.
The next one is, could you please explain how were you able to determine whether an order was a fraudulent order?
Okay. So in fact, determination of fraudulent order is not done by us. Now Shopify has certain intelligence. So when a credit card is used, it kind of checks few things. It checks the amount, it checks the location of the credit card usage, and if it is matching with the owner location or owner zip code. And using all of these parameters, Shopify comes out with a recommendation. If the recommendation is that reject the order, it is highly likely that this is a fraudulent order. We map this accordingly in the delivery block. So it's basically Shopify determining the fraudulent order part, not us, and we do the mapping accordingly so that if a fraudulent order is placed, it actually goes to a delivery block and somebody in the team, in the customer team, can actually see if they want to release the block. What we have realized is that approximately 1% of all the orders are actually fraudulent orders, and some of these orders are actually very high value. So if somebody is committing a fraud, they are like putting in $1,000, beauty product order. So it is like if we do not have this in place, that order will get shipped, and it is going to be like a problem for the merchant. So that's what we did around fraudulent orders.
And the next question is, how do you synchronize the credit card information to SAP?
Okay, so when we get the web orders from Shopify, usually there's a payment gateway which is integrated with Shopify, let's say authorize.net, or maybe PayPal or anything. Now, when the transaction happens, the credit card information is something that is very confidential and secure. So we do not sync the credit card number. But what we synchronize with SAP is the transaction reference number or the authorization number. So that goes into SAP order. And when the account receivable team is actually reconciling, they can see the authorization reference number or the authorization number. And when they see that in the transaction, in the bank transaction, they could exactly know which order are we talking about. So that helps in financial reconciliation.
The next one, what do you mean by synchronizing ATP quantity during inventory sync?
Okay. So ATP quantity is basically available to promise. As I was mentioning that the stock doesn't necessarily correspond to what you can commit for a new incoming order. So even if you have, let's say, 1,000 quantities in your plant and all of them are reserved for certain orders, your actual ATP quantity is zero. So when you have these inventory being synced in Shopify, it makes sense to sync the ATP quantity and not the actual stock, because the stock may be unavailable. And I would also want to tell you that whereas in SAP you can have different plants, but in Shopify we can have only one stock for a particular material. So we kind of map a plant and take the ATP quantity for that SKU and we send it to a Shopify.
The next question, do you suggest a different plan for Shopify inventory or using a common plan for e-commerce and offline orders?
Okay, so you can actually have a common plant, and this is actually a business decision, I would say. So I'll tell you the pros and cons for both of them. So let's say if you go for a common plant, let's say if you have plant 100 and that caters to both B2B and your B2C or the online sales, right? So you are basically saying that if I have 100 stock in my or 100 quantity available to promise for a new incoming order, be it B2B or B2C, you are not differentiating between the channels and you are letting people come and buy on first come first serve basis. Now the problem with this approach is that although it is making your entire inventory available for sale across channels, what happens if there's a B2B order, a large B2B order, right, a bulk one, and it consumes all your stock in one go. Let's say there's a popular product and all the stock is consumed in one single order. Okay. And almost at the same time, before the inventory could be synced with Shopify every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes, you have a B2C customer placing an order for the same product. And unfortunately, by the time he could place the order or he placed the order, the actual inventory was already reserved for this B2B customer. So in these cases, you might have to cancel or refund the customer. His experience may go down. So some companies, what they do is they have different plan for B2C and they would want to move the quantity that and they want to sell online. So if let's say out of 100, they would want to, let's say, make 30 available for online sales, they would move that much stock to the online plant. So in this case, 30 would be visible to the B2C buyers and 70 would be visible to B2B buyers. And in case they feel that they're getting more orders online, they might want to do a stock transfer order between those two plants and manage it accordingly. So both these options have their own plus and minus, and it's actually a business decision on whether to have a separate plant for e-commerce or not. Okay, I think we have taken a few questions, and I think there might be more coming in. And what we'll try to do is that we will have these questions listed and answered offline or maybe on the web page. So Anmol, I think that's it from my side, and over to you.
Yes, we are getting a lot of questions over here, and we can answer them over email. And this was a lovely webinar, and I think the attendees might have enjoyed it. And there's a lot to learn, and they can connect with you if there's any problem, and we'll be answering all the questions over email. So yes, let's move ahead. And so thank you everyone. Thank you Shalendu. Thank you Harshit, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. You'll get a recorded video of this over email. Okay.
Thank you so much, Anmol. Thanks, Harshit. Have a nice day, guys.
Thank you so much, Shalan. Thank you, Shalan. Thank you, Anmol. Thank you, everyone.